The Downtown Rams podcast is brought to you by our proud sponsors, Rams On Demand, SeatGiant, Throwback Joe, and now our new sponsor, Kayvon Webster's new LA food truck, VYBE 305, from South Beach to Sunset. Hashtag catch a vibe. For more information, check out VYBE305.com today. Now enjoy the show.
35-30. Robert Woods, first down 20. 10-5. Touchdown. LA.
It's a blinding light underneath the dirt down.
No, it's Goff who keeps it. And Goff goes crashing into the end zone.
6th Street Bridge.
Aaron Donald almost beat the football there and comes away with his third sack of the afternoon. Not immediately in sack. Corey Littleton, have yourself a day.
When will you save me?
Todd Gurley, 20, 10. Gurley for MVP. Touchdown LA. And he gets gobbled up. Savage has to eat it as Michael Brockers picks up the sack.
It's Picks. Nicole Roby Coleman.
He's decked by Khan.
Touchdown. Brandon Cooks. Incredible.
For the first time since 2003, the Rams are NFC West champions.
Welcome back, guys, to another Downtown Rams podcast. This is episode 126. I'm here with my buddy Joe Curley, and we are going to give you a preview of the Rams and Seahawks Week 5 matchup. This has all the makings of being a blowout, but Joe, we have to treat every game like every game the same way, I guess. Maybe not the same as, say, a Thursday night football game against the Vikings, but yeah, we'll give this its due, and it's a game, Joe. It's one of the 16 that they have to play. So
come on, Jake. One game at a time. One game at a time.
You were thinking the same thing I was, so don't even.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, off air is always such a treat, is it not? Anyway, we have some news, Joe. During the week, the Rams made some moves. The unfortunate thing, and I'm sure you'll be able to attest to it, but Sean McVay was actually really. I could see the sincerity, in his voice and the way he was speaking about Dominic Easley. That injury that's going to put him on IR, it's his knee. He's had so many different operations on his knee. He's been injured constantly, but, the guy keeps fighting, and despite, the massive amount of people that question his work ethic and his character early on in his career, he's still here, and he's still been working hard, and he became the starter, at the edge position for the Rams, and it's really tough because the Rams just put him on IR, and, that whole thing that went down. I mean, what were your overall thoughts on that? Because that was the first thing I noticed, Joe, when Sean McVay had that interview, or the presser, and he's talking about Dom Easley. I could see how he actually really was serious about how he felt. Like, he was not cool with it.
Well, you've got somebody who's, let's be honest, whose career is kind of hanging in the balance. I mean, somebody who's had, about as much history with his knees as any football player that we've dealt with, with the 2 surgeries, 2 ACLs he had at Florida, again with the Rams. And, he's really had, this is somebody who's been very effective when he's been able to stay on the field. Somebody who, was a really good situational pass rusher with the Patriots before, his knee issues got him run out of New England. Somebody who was very effective with his first year here when he was healthy. And then obviously they missed him last year. Somebody who, let's be honest, had made a surprisingly good transition to outside linebacker at a position where they needed him. So not only is it a blow for Dominique, potentially losing him for the season, but it's also, makes the Rams more vulnerable at arguably, their most vulnerable position. Matt Longacre coming off that back injury becomes even more important. You're talking about rookies. After that with Young and if they get Okoronkwo, another guy who we've yet to see because of his foot injury. maybe Justin Lawler steps up, but really that position, you start to get pretty thin. They're gonna, you wonder if they're gonna be trolling through, the wire, trying to rotate some guys and see if they can get hit on another guy like they did briefly with Ryan Davis before he went down. So yeah, I mean, it's bad for Dom, it's bad for the Rams, it's bad for everyone. So Rams certainly have not had the same sort of injury luck that they had last year. That's for sure. Up and down the roster, it certainly affected them, and it's been even more impressive that they're 4-0. Super Bowl favorites, despite taking on water all over the roster from an injury perspective.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It really does suck with Dominic Easley. I think the biggest thing about him is that he was injured. I mean, let's not forget this guy was coming back from his injury, and it did bleed into the offseason program, and so he was a little behind the 8 ball. But then all of a sudden, now he's the number one guy on the edge, across from, Samson Ebukam. So I was really impressed with his ability to not only recover and become a starter, but become a starter at a position that he had not played since entering the league. He was more of an interior guy. So very impressed with him. And then, to go down with that injury, it's very unfortunate. But it does open up the door for an Ogbonnia Okoronkwo to fit right in there, a Trayvon Young, a Justin Lawler. But the Rams also did go out and they tried out a bunch of players. Now, they didn't necessarily sign them all, and they weren't all necessarily going to fill the void, and none of them made the active roster. But the thing here to remember is that last year, the Rams signed Garrett Sickles, former pass rusher from Cleveland Browns, to their practice squad. He ended up coming up and actually playing meaningful downs for that team. He played in the big Seattle blowout. He played in the Tennessee Titans game. He started the 49ers game. I don't know if he saw too many snaps in the playoff game, probably on special teams, but it goes to show even though these guys are on the practice squad, I mean, there's always a chance that, this guy could get his number called. And, the Rams, they go out and they try out Anthony Winbush, a player I liked a lot coming out of Ball State, edge rusher, Portland State defensive back Xavier Coleman, TCU cornerback Ranthony Texada, and then they didn't go with those guys. They also tried out kicker Kai Forbath. They instead signed Javon Roland-Jones, who I really liked coming out of Arkansas State. Javon Roland-Jones is somebody that I could definitely see coming up to this active roster and, competing in this rotation. Mike Cahill pointed out on Twitter that Roland-Jones had the 9th highest pass rush productivity among edge defenders in the draft at 13.3, produced 164 quarterback pressures over his last 997 pass rush snaps in college. And the Bengals, he was on the Bengals off-season roster. Bengals fans were livid when they let him go. He has a little bit of a following early on, and he is a UDFA, but he's definitely a name to watch. So that's what went down, and the Rams also added defensive back Lyndon Stevens to the practice squad, cutting defensive end Marcus Martin, and now the practice squad's full. Mentioned Kai Forbath earlier. The Rams also let go of a kicker who actually kicked in the postseason. So he had a postseason start, and Greg Zuerlein still has not had a postseason start. And Sam Ficken was cut, and the Rams signed Cairo Santos, who I reported earlier on, I believe it was now, Wednesday, Tuesday? I forget what day it was, Joe, but I did report that the Rams were visiting with him, and that it seems to me like they didn't really want that to get out, because they only leaked that Kai Forbath was going to be working out, so I find that kind of like they made up their mind and maybe they were just bringing him in. But the Rams really just wanted a veteran that could be consistent, not force them to really rush back Greg. This is a groin injury, and Greg has had this before. It plagued Greg Zuerlein going back to the St. Louis days. He went from, rookie phenom kicker to all of a sudden, where did he go? And I think that they're being smart with this, Joe, because, this is one of their weapons. I mean, I know he's just a kicker, but I mean, he was pretty close to setting the season, the single season record for points. So he's not a slouch.
Well, I think, R.I.P. Sam Ficken. You don't stick around very often, missing chip shot field goals. But, he gave them, certainly, he survived last year and, was a part of that team that reached the playoffs. I think Rams fans can tip their cap, and thank him for a job well done. The interesting thing is cutting him midstream like this to try to bring in, somebody else. It shows, one, obviously they weren't happy with what San was doing, but two, I think I wonder if Greg was, Greg might, the sense is that, Greg is closer than, maybe we thought, but, like you said, treating it with kid gloves, maybe being a week too late rather than a week too early. Cause all that really matters, it's so important that Greg Zuerlein is healthy, at the end of the season. So, the next, I would give it a couple weeks, and a couple extra weeks and get him healthy, get him back for the second half of the season, and maybe just try to survive with Santos, in the short term. But it is interesting that they did pull the trigger so quickly. It shows that maybe he just wasn't looking good in practice as well. Could have gotten one kick.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense for sure. I think really it was I guess the barometer is this. This almost cost the Rams a game that they probably should have won by more than a touchdown. That almost cost them to go to overtime. He misses that kick, and then all of a sudden puts them in a position where, just like last Thursday night football game, last year, Rams 49ers, it came down to a defensive lineman, and this time it was John Franklin Myers. Last time it was Aaron Donald. I mean, that was tough, and that is one of those things, Joe, where I was talking with my father about this, and I mean, you're looking at 4-0 or 3-1, but at the end of the day, if they went 3-1 based on the way that offense played, Goff throwing 5 touchdowns and they lose, all of that, I just think that could have been enough to really derail what they're doing. I'm not saying it would have, but that's one of those things that really kind of kills the momentum you're building early on in the season. And I know before the season, a lot of people would have taken 3-1. I personally felt like they should be 4-0. As great as the Vikings were last year, I do think the Rams have kind of leaped over them, and I think you saw that on Thursday Night Football. But, the big point here is that, Sam Ficken misses that kick, and now all of a sudden, it's really something that you have to sweat out at the end. And while it was, kind of back and forth, it looked like the Rams were pulling away a little bit. And clearly Sean McVay was play calling that drive based on the fact that he felt comfortable that Sam Ficken was going to put 3 points on the board, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been the game ender, and certainly the Vikings that's a key game because the Vikings are vulnerable right now. You want to take advantage of them before they get their defense back together and they're starting to play as well as they were last year. And these games that they play against the Packers, the Vikings, the Eagles, the Saints, these are all game and a halves because you're talking about the most important thing the Rams are playing for during the regular season is, home field throughout the playoffs, is that bye. And what did we see last year when they lost those key games to the Vikings and the Eagles? Basically they weren't in the running by the end of the year because, for that bye, because not only were they a game behind, but they had the tiebreakers were in effect, the head-to-head tiebreaker. They had lost those. And so, it was virtually impossible. In the middle of December, Rams were looking up, trying to get into that bye situation. They had lost those games. So, those games become even more important, I want to say, than even a game like this weekend against a divisional opponent, because the Rams aren't just playing for the NFC West now. They're playing, they're playing for the whole thing. They're playing, and in order, you really increase your chances at playing for a Super Bowl when you get the bye, when you get home field. So that's got to be the target at this point. And, any little thing down the stretch that puts one of those games, in jeopardy is significant. Just look at that Eagles game. Really, they blew that Eagles game last year so many different ways. They really should have won that Eagles game when Wentz gets hurt. And, to not take advantage of that, to not both deal the Eagles a loss and have that tiebreaker and be able to, play the Niners with a chance to get up over the Eagles at the end of the game, that's probably that could have been the difference between them going to the Super Bowl and not last year. So, you can understand being a little ruthless in those scenarios, but it was an interesting turn that they pulled the trigger so quickly against Sam Pickens.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And oh my God, the Eagles game, 100%. I mean, Rob Havenstein goes down. You put in Daryl Williams, who's not even on the roster anymore, and he gives up a
immediately
complete blow by Chris Long, first play. I mean, pretty much like the Colts left tackle tonight. Like, it was bad. But moving on. We discussed Cairo Santos, discussed the practice squad, Dom Easley on IR. We head to the injuries and the injury report. I didn't want to go through all of it, Joe, because there's a lot of guys that aren't going to practice because of non-injury related reasons. And I just don't find it really necessary to list it because they're going to play. But the big one, I think, is, and not necessarily for the Seahawks game, but I mean moving forward, is JoJo Natson. And I know, it's crazy. I mean, Mark Barron is probably going to come back soon too, but JoJo Natson, I think, is huge because what you saw in the Vikings game was just kind of like average kick returning, which Rams fans aren't used to because they had a Pro Bowl guy last year, and then JoJo Natson took over for that said Pro Bowl guy after he got hurt and really made, watching returning exciting. And then, Blake Countess, I didn't think was bad at it, but he wasn't anything to really light a spark. I think in any game, if you have a kick returner like that, you always have to keep the team on their toes. And so I think he's kind of the equalizer if, they get into another, and I believe they will, get into one of those shootout games like they did against Minnesota. So having, JoJo Natson back, he was a full participant in practice. We're recording this on, well, now it's a Friday, but we were recording this on a Thursday night on the East Coast, rather. And so, JoJo is expected to be back. He did break his hand, but looks like he's going to be good to go. Higbee and Saffold are expected to go, although they didn't practice today. That was a little bit of a weird thing. I don't know if you can shed some light on that. I know both of them had knee injuries. Higbee suffered his in the Vikings game. I know He was shaken up early on, and they did end up coming back in. You have to wonder if that's a game where the Rams are, handily beating the team, and it's not a Vikings, close matchup, whether or not he comes back in. But he did come back in, so, do you have anything on that?
No, I mean, I think it's just a maintenance thing. It's probably something that, certainly Higbee was in the game. We saw that where he left and his snap numbers were down. Saffold, it's just got to be something that's barking. Coach McVay has seen has said really that, he's confident that he's going to play. So, it might be one of those things that, they're both kind of playing through it. Maybe you see an opportunity here, for Everett to really get some snap count, so to get an increase in workload and show that he could play the wide position on a semi-full-time basis. Certainly, Saffold with his injury history now, he's had a couple of years now where he's been healthy, but, you start to worry, if he gets, banged up. So you may want to baby him a little bit. I don't know if they're considering, giving Brown some time and moving Blythe over, maybe having some contingency plans in case it really starts to hurt. But the one good thing is that you do like the fact that they do have a lot of depth in the interior offensive line, whether it's Blythe, whether it's Brown, whether it's Neary. They have built up depth there. So it is one of those positions that they could handle if they had to they had to sit him for a short term. But, both of those did seem to kind of come out of nowhere this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they, I mentioned earlier, Mark Barron, who was a limited participant. He's considered questionable at this time, which is, an upgrade from last week, which was doubtful. I really like the idea of Barron playing next week. This is not a game that, we would assume the Rams are going to be fighting down to the wire to win. I mean, any given Sunday. But I personally, Joe, I would wait until Denver. But, I mean, if he's good to go, he's good to go. So, I'm not pushing him this week. But, if he's good to go, I have no problem trotting him out there. But if he's anything like Marcus Peters, I do want to bring this up because I know some people thought I was hating on Marcus Peters, but the fact of the matter is I think he showed a lot of strength and overall love for the game and pretty much it's all about his team and his teammates and everything, and he wanted the resiliency and everything. But Marcus Peters did not play the same. I think we can all agree he did not look the same. He was out of position at times, made some mental errors that Adam Thielen play where he didn't actually end up touching him. He was lucky he was, ruled down or whatever. Things like that. But
the play the first touchdown that goes right through him. I mean, if Marcus Peters is healthy, that's a pick. And, the Vikings were smart to attack him. But, I thought it was a gamble. When you have a guy who's hurt like that, I'll tell you now, there's nobody in that media room that thought he was going to play earlier in the week. We all thought that he was going to sit because it didn't make sense to try to play him on a short week. But certainly, it shows you how much Coach McVay listens to his players. It shows you what type of gamer Marcus Peters is, that he's willing to play at sub 100%. So, those two things matter. And he played every snap too. He didn't come out. So, I think obviously he's played through his issue. You would consider with the injury he had, Marcus Peters probably be pretty close to 100% this week and going forward.
Most definitely. What I'm looking at is if Mark Barron is anything like that. Because, my thing, Joe, is, and this is one thing, it's hard for people to know that have never played a sport. If you play anything, or if you do anything with an injury, you're always thinking about the injury. Whether you realize it or not, it's on your mind. So, it just kind of throws off your equilibrium, I guess is the way to put it. And, Marcus Peters, you could tell he wasn't fully into it. I'm not saying he wasn't, revved up for the game. I'm not saying he wasn't focused on the game. But there were times where, like you said, I mean, that should have been an interception. The one where, Cousins throws the touchdown to Aldrick Robinson. That just looked like prime, Marcus Peters pick, but then it ends up being a touchdown. You're like, okay, he's not even 70%. I like to say he's around the 60% mark, maybe even less, but still cool they went out there. I hope, Barron gets healthy. I think it'll be really fun to see him with Corey Littleton. I think you're going to see a lot of strength in coverage. Mark Barron has continued to improve as a cover guy. as well as a run support guy. So I think the Rams are really going to welcome him. How I view him is he's kind of a wait-and-see approach. We don't know if he's going to be a long-term Ram or not. We don't know what the coaching staff feels, but he survived, through the first purge of the unit. He, beat out Ogletree, who got the extension with this regime. So I guess we'll see. But, he's definitely a key contributor, and he is a guy that, just like, you bring in a Marcus Peters to create turnovers, Aqib Talib. I mean, he's somebody that can create turnovers. He lays the wood. You've seen it before. He's forced some fumbles before. He really hits hard, and it's going to be great to have him back, in the middle. So, really looking forward to that. And, I think
it's been a long wait. I think Ramik Wilson has been fine. There hasn't really, if you think about it, we haven't seen a ton. Like, what has Ramik Wilson done in the first 4 games? Does he have kind of a signature moment so far? So I think that's good and bad. Certainly he hasn't really done much that's caught the eye, but also he's not getting blown up. He's not getting beaten. It's not like he's killing the rest. So I think he kind of got them through this first quarter of the season without Mark Barron. And now, it'll be interesting to see what Barron gives you. If he looks like himself, if he has to ramp up a little bit. He hasn't played, didn't have preseason, didn't have OTAs, he basically, the last time we saw him was the end of last year. So, you wonder if it's going to take him some time to kind of ramp up and be himself. So, that's something, he's certainly something to watch this week.
Yes, he definitely is. I think he'll end up playing. I really do.
He's expected to play for sure.
Yeah. But with the Seahawks, they have KJ Wright, who I mentioned earlier, Frank Clark, who I mentioned earlier, and second round pick out of USC, Rasheem Green. They all did not practice. They're all contributors to this team, so that is kind of a bummer on their part. But they did get Russell Wilson fully practicing, and it was a long injury report, Joe, that I didn't feel like sifting through. So, those are the bigger names of the bunch, and then guys that are clearly going to play. Obviously, Doug Baldwin's back and Chris Carson, so I didn't bother with that. But moving on, the last part of this podcast, because this is a shorter podcast, because it's not. It's not a marquee match. The Rams-Broncos game, I'll tell you that right now, that is going to need a big podcast. You're cracking up over there, but, come on. Let's be real here.
Come on.
Yeah.
They're
going a mile high. So let me get this straight, Joe. They're going from Seattle to Mile High. So they're going from Seattle, Quest Field, like the hurricane environment of that fan base, to Mile High, where it's also a huge advantage for the home team because of the altitude, and these guys are so used to playing in that, and the way they stood toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Now, that was a rivalry game. I know rivalry games are closer. They know each other, but I don't know. Case Keenum, he gets a chance to face the Rams again, and
there's a little
last
rival
time.
Let me lay it out here. It's so funny. I was just saying, you were joking about what I was saying off air, and what I was saying off air was that this is probably the least the least excited I've been for a Rams game since they've come back to Los Angeles, simply because you look at the first 4 games this year, you had the McVay-Gruden Bowl, you had the home opener against the Cards, you had the battle for LA, and then you had all the storylines of the Vikings game, the loss last year to both the Vikings and the loss last year to Kirk Cousins that the Rams were able to avenge, Thursday Night Football, everything that kind of went along, the return of having the uniforms unveiled and all that stuff. There's so much going on the first 4 weeks, and they play so well, and now they're Super Bowl favorites, legitimately. And Jared Goff, as we haven't even mentioned, is rookie NFC Offensive Player of the Week, NFC Offensive Player of the Month. And he's gone. Your boy Sims doesn't have him in his top 10, and all of a sudden it's the biggest slap in the history of slap. Everything is suddenly the acceleration on the hype train is just going crazy. And now they're 7-point favorites in Seattle, and people are banging that Rams button this week. I mean, it's with the way the Seahawks. Think about like the Seahawks game used to be one. Just recently, a couple years ago, was the biggest game on this schedule when it came out, and now they're going up there to Seattle, and it's almost a yawn because, like you bring up, after that you've got the Case Keenum Bowl. You've got a Niners game, which is obviously diminished with Garoppolo's injury, but then Packers, Saints, Seahawks at home. So, then, obviously Chiefs, which could be the game of the year in the NFL. The Bears and Eagles are on the schedule. So really, this is one of those ebb games. This is one of those, catch your breath games. I know you're excited because it's now been a good, week since the Rams have taken the field, but, it's kind of a yawner, and it's interesting. It shows you how far the Rams have come that they're playing the Seahawks in Seattle, and I'm gonna need to get up for it. I need a pep talk. I think I need you to give me a pep talk here on. I'll be ready for it by Sunday, but it's just yeah.
And did I just? Joe, did I just hear you knocking the same 49ers that are you really knocking CJ Beathard? Really? CJ Beathard stood toe to toe with Phillip Rivers and put them in position to win that game.
Yeah, he did look pretty good.
On the road.
CJ Beathard, the Niners are obliterated. We got criticized for talking too much Niners, so let's not talk too much Niners. A couple weeks ago, we're crapped on for we were closing the door in the 2018 Niners season. So, the next chance the Niners may have at getting a win is when the backups are playing in Week 17 in LA. That's how CJ Beathard and the group are. They're in some serious trouble. But it's funny. The division games. That's the state of the NFC and the NFC West right now. Is the division games are the holes in the schedule. The Rams have become the New England friggin' Patriots with the AFC East, with the Bills and the Dolphins and the Jets being such garbage that every out of division game, all of a sudden, it used to be the division was the games you look forward to. Now the state of the NFC and the NFC West, the pockmarks, the divots in this schedule are the division games. It's crazy how fast things change in this league.
Yeah, this is why. I mean, this is what happens when you have a great coach. I did just see something where I'm not trying to knock the guy, but I just saw something where Jim Schwartz was the favorite to land the Cleveland job if they fire Hugh Jackson.
What?
Like why? Like, have you not learned anything from Matt Nagy and Sean McVay? Matt Nagy in 4 games, I mean, Khalil Mack as well, has transformed this team. I mean, this team last year with John Fox, I was like, John Fox is Jeff Fisher, and this team is that Rams team that I was like, wow, we should have won that game. Well, no, you shouldn't have, because you weren't able to get it done because you had Jeff Fisher or John Fox as your coach.
Ooh, Jeff Fisher. How about that? Jeff Fisher in Cleveland.
No, stop it. But no, I mean, Joe, like, there are young minds out there. Like, I would not be surprised if Cleveland, I mean, hear me out here. Titans are off to a rough start, but they just came alive and they beat Philly in overtime. Carson Wentz is back, looks great. They beat Philly, and let me tell you, Marcus Mariota looks healthy. Man. They look good. They looked good, and now, hold on. It's
Yeah, I
week
know
4.
where
We're
you're
going into
going.
week 5.
The guy's been there for a month.
Matt LaFleur.
Been there for a month.
Matt LaFleur will be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns if they fire Hugh Jackson. Book it.
There are worse decisions. There are worse ideas than that.
Actually, I'll say
namely
this.
would be Jim Schwartz. No, you know who it's going to be? Do we know
It's
who
going to be
be?
John DeFilippo.
No, it's not. It's going to be the coach of Oklahoma. It's going to be Baker's college coach.
Oh, whoa.
How is he not
Mr. Storyline creator over here.
No, I saw that. How is he not? He's got to be on that list. I'm frantically Googling, trying to find these lines. It's going to be...
No, because everyone's saying Matt Rule is the next guy from Baylor.
Yeah, I like him. Wait. Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley is the name that you need to know.
Lincoln Riley is legit.
Plus, he's Baker's coach. Bam. And he's a really innovative offensive guy. He's one of the few guys that could make that leap. So anyway,
all right.
Yeah, that's
so I'm just
good call.
Putting it out there.
Up with some names there.
All right, I'll put it out. Matt LaFleur, and if it's not Matt LaFleur, it'll be John DeFilippo. You heard it here first.
See, we put a better. I gotta find that link and send it to me. I want to see the other names on that list. But I'll tell you right now, we just came up with 3-4 names, all of them better than Schwartz.
Why is Schwartz the favorite? Like, again, I like the guy.
Yeah, I don't know.
He gets his defenses playing, but
come on,
man,
he was a terrible head coach at the Lions.
That's what I'm saying. Guys that just didn't do it. I mean, look at Josh McDaniels. Like, I don't know.
There's no way if they do that, then they belong still being the Browns. Can you imagine Lincoln Riley and Baker Mayfield pulling it back together with all that talent? You just saw Nick Chubb, go nuts. So, yeah. They look good. But he's not even going to get fired. They look good. They're winning games.
The Browns?
Yeah.
Well, they just lost to the Raiders, but...
Oh, they lost that game. Forgot about that. Yeah, because they didn't tie. That doubles
to keep the streak alive. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna. You've been exposed, Mr. Joe Curley. Everybody, this is the guy that roots for the tie.
Oh yeah, you gotta have a tie. I'll explain it. When I was in college, I was I don't know what the hell we were watching a Sunday night game between the Giants and the Redskins. And when you watch those games, you don't really have a rooting interest, but it's the NFL and it's on and you're watching it. And, we just decided that we were just going to root for a tie. And it was like the first quarter. We watched the whole game and it was a tie. I think it was the game. Was it is it Michael Westbrooks? Was that the receiver for Westbrooks was a receiver for Washington about 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And he got a penalty at the end of the game to knock them out of field goal range. And in late in overtime, it's why Washington couldn't win the game on a field goal at the end, and they ended up tying the Giants. And now every time I watch a neutral game, I end up rooting for a tie once it gets to overtime. Because the other thing about it is a tie kind of screws both teams. If you're a neutral fan and you want your team, say it's two other NFC teams, the Vikings-Packers tie was a tremendous result for the Rams because it's like a half loss for both those teams. You're taking that loss and you're splitting it and you're affecting both of those teams negatively. And so I believe if you're a neutral and you're watching a game that both teams could affect you, you got to root for the tie because that's a win for your team. When the Packers and the Vikings tied the first week this season, the Chicago Bears won a game right there, or the Rams won a game right there. That's the way. That's why I'm always rooting for the tie in those scenarios. First of all, it's funny, and like the whole like you can't have ties in football, you can't have ties in America. That whole group, they all get annoyed, which I find funny. But also, the other thing about it's like a legitimate thing to root for to help your team if your team's not involved, because it's basically a double loss or you're splitting that loss. It's affecting both teams, and so there's a couple reasons why you see me on Twitter, especially these days when it seems to be in play all the time so far, and we've had multiple ties. We've had a bunch of other games. I found it fascinating at the end of the Titans game and the end of what was the other game, where teams could have lined up to tie, with the new overtime rules. You've got all these permutations that never happened before, and you had multiple coaches who could have played for the tie and taken the half. In their perspective, they're going to lose. You got to hit the field goal.
Vrabel don't play that though.
Yeah, Vrabel said, he's like, in America we play to win. And it's like so good. So anyway, but you got to take, you're talking about, they got to look at it as a tie, as a half win. If you got no win, you take a field goal for a half win. If you're tied, anyway, that's why you see me on the Sundays, especially when the Rams aren't playing, rooting for ties, because it's just craziness, and it's it's a mayhem. And at some point, you're rooting for the other teams that just havoc. And then the rest of the year we get to say, what's the Packers record? Or no, what was the Steelers?
Joe, you know who you are.
No, the Steelers
You're the
are
mayhem
0-2-1.
guy.
Yeah, that's right. They should do a commercial. Oh, that's a great that'd be great insurance commercial. It's like where he's like rooting for the Packers season, or what are the Steelers? The Steelers are 0-2-1 or whatever they are, 1-2-1 now. It's just great.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna start a gang. It's gonna be like the third column crew or something.
Joe, you never cease to amaze me. Oh my god. This is where we know who the diehards are. Like when I look at the average listen time and it's past this point, that's
right.
how I'm gonna know we have some serious.
We haven't lost you by this point talking about ties in the NFL. Because
you are a real
ties used to be a thing in football. You used to not have overtimes. You used to have. You look at those old records, and there was ties.
Still talking about ties.
All right, sorry. Move on. Yeah, sorry about that. My bad.
Oh,
are we going to talk about this football game at all?
Well, speaking of a game that won't be a tie, the Rams and the Seahawks.
Look at that.
Yeah,
genius right there.
The king of the segues. So yeah. Anyway, we have our preview, and it's going to be pretty short and sweet. Key matchups, Joe. Do you have any? Because I do think Marcus Peters versus. Who is he going up against? Is it going to be Doug Baldwin? Is it going to be Tyler Lockett? Has Tyler Lockett put himself in that category where he's considered a poor man's Tyreek Hill, where you absolutely have to guard him because he is really explosive?
Well, I will say you do have to defend. You do have to defend him. Tyler Lockett has had a strong opening month of the season, and he's starting. He's somebody who has that skill set, that Tyreek Hill skill set. He's injuries have obviously plagued him. He hasn't reached his potential, but he's been. They've needed somebody with Baldwin being hurt, and there's been a lot of issues on certainly up and down that roster. But they've needed him, and he's given them a good month of the year. And you wonder if he's the guy that Marcus Peters is going to be traveling with, especially if Baldwin is not 100% yet. But my key matchup for this game is I'm going to be watching this Rams front. I'm going to be watching the defensive line, because you got to love watching Aaron Donald every time the Rams play the Seahawks, and watching him chase down Russell Wilson. I think you're going to have those sack numbers that everybody's been complaining about, even though the Rams, according to Pro Football Focus, have been the best pass rushing team in the league, even though you hear people complaining that the pass rush hasn't been getting sacks. Maybe this is the game that they start to pile up those sack numbers a little bit. I think that's there's a lot of potential for that this weekend. So I like that. I like kind of with this, when Seattle has the ball and Rams being on defense, there's a lot to watch there. And then, I guess the other side is, we get to see if Jared Goff can continue to stay hot. That's a big part of this. He certainly is among the hottest players in football. People are talking about him as an MVP candidate, and it's him and Mahomes and a couple other guys as being the guys that have really stood out the first month of the NFL season. And you got to watch him to see if this is a permanent thing. Is he just hot right now, or is this a growth cycle? Similar to what we saw in the early part of last year. Is this somebody who's gone from the 15th, 16th best quarterback in the league? Is he now a legitimate top 10, top 5 quarterback in this league? And the way you become that is by having an entire season playing the way he's playing right now.
I most certainly agree, and one thing I will say is, I've said this so many times, Sean McVay dumbed down, or rather, made the play calling extremely conservative to benefit Jared Goff against a really tough defense in Jacksonville. Really interested to see how Patrick Mahomes handles Jacksonville. Kind of low-key. I know it's kind of off-topic, but that's what's going to really intrigue me. As you know, Patrick Mahomes, and many people know, that was my guy. In that draft, 2017 draft, when he was drafted, I said he's better than Watson, he's better than Trubisky, he's better than all of them. And, I don't really understand the boom or bust because this guy only threw 10 interceptions in college and was kind of getting an unfair label because of his giant arm. I guess sometimes, it almost seems, Joe, where people try to create this narrative where a guy is careless with the football because he's got, unbelievable arm strength and throws the football down the field quite often. It's like, he only had 10 interceptions at Texas Tech. He's not going to start just throwing interceptions now. He reads defenses well, and he's just phenomenal talent. But we'll see, against Jacksonville, just like, we saw Jared Goff against Jacksonville. We'll see where. I'd really be interested to see if Jacksonville is intimidating enough where they get, they rattle Mahomes early. I think they win the football game, because I think the thing that is keeping Kansas City above and winning games is the offense that, while I don't think they match the Rams entirely, I think they're one of the top 3 offenses in football. So, we'll see in that regard. But, moving back to this game, what to watch for, I would say this, Joe. Right now, Todd Gurley is the most underrated elite player I've ever seen. He is actually in the MVP discussion for, all these different outlets that are putting out a top 5. He's in that top 5. And you're barely hearing about him because of Jared Goff. Like, you're Todd Gurley, here's the facts. Going back and watching the film of the Vikings-Rams game, Todd Gurley was used as a decoy. He played, sure. He had a lot of success in that game, but mainly Todd Gurley was used as a decoy. Oh, did you see who was doing the fake end arounds, the fake jet sweeps? That was Todd Gurley and others.
Yeah. No. I think Todd's fine with being the decoy. For a little bit, he's got that Offensive Player of the Year in his trophy case, and he's, everything's coming up. Rams, and his quarterback is, making a name for himself, and everything's cool in Rams land. I think, so I don't know. We can kind of tone the anger down there, buddy. But anyway,
wait, what? Teasing. What anger? No.
I'm just teasing. Everything's cool.
I thought it was
and this
awesome.
is the thing. There's so much. That's the other thing. Is you were right. This offense is so productive that everybody's contributing and everything's impressive and everything's good. And really, I think one thing we got to mention is it's starting up front. The Rams are number 1 in pass protection, according to Pro Football Focus. They're number 2 in run blocking, according to Pro Football Focus. So they're playing tremendously well up front. We'll see if Saffold's injury kind of affects that at all. But, everything, there's really not a ton through the quarter pole here to poke holes in on this team. You got a couple injuries here and there. I think maybe the one place you could really, people are complaining about the sacks defensively, but I think, they've played pretty well defensively, even though they've given up points. And I think really special teams has been maybe the one place that you can criticize. They're not up to their normal standard so far on special teams. So, but really all in all, you put it together and, they've obviously been the best team in football or them and the Chiefs have been the best team in football. So, we'll see where this goes, but they're so good now that they're going into Seattle and it's Thursday and I'm yawning. So I'm sure I'll turn it around by Sunday, brother.
Oh, you will. You will. You've had a long week, a lot of working. I'm sure,
That's right. There's a lot going on.
Sunday comes along and you'll be like, oh, football. Oh, another win in Jake's Dynasty League.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not going to jinx it. Let's not bring that up. I want to continue that.
In that case,
that trend.
Let's jinx it. Let's jinx it.
How's it going, Jake? You gave Jake an L. I gave Alex an L. All the guys I want to beat in that league. I'm feeling pretty good, which means I'm going to blow it in the playoffs. So we'll
hey,
stop,
Joe, you know how you beat me?
Now.
It was on the shoulders of Tyler Lockett.
Oh, was it really? Nice.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Well, I only targeted because of return yardage. But let's not. Now people are going to start to turn this thing off because we're talking. No one wants to hear about someone else's fantasy team. I know that.
Hey, you never know. X Factors. So, Joe's X Factor was Tyler Lockett in his fantasy game against me. But the X Factors in this game, well, I got some for you. So, I'll bring into the Rams. The first X Factor I'm going to give you is Gerald Everett. Yes, Gerald Everett. The Gerald Everett that isn't quite the starter, but he's kind of going to be the starter, and we kind of all know it, but he also is caught in between that line of not really having to be the starter because he's still going to be used in Sean McVay's offense. So, yeah, Gerald Everett is one of my X Factors here, and here's why. First off, who's going to be covering him? Who are the linebackers there? Is Bobby Wagner even playing? I'm pretty sure he is, so that sounds stupid. But KJ Wright's not. And I don't like that Calitro guy. And Shaquem Griffin's benched.
Calitro guy.
So, Barkevious Mingo. Let's ask Joe what he thinks about Barkevious Mingo. Yeah, so, no.
Barkevious is a good name because he's been a dog in the NFL. Holy crap.
Anyway, Gerald Everett started to really log the snaps last week, albeit it was based on what Joe Curley said earlier. It was based on Tyler Higbee's early injury. However, Gerald Everett has had some serious production in limited opportunities. I would imagine he's going to have a touchdown this game, maybe even two. This is somebody, you see guys around the league, George Kittle catching almost an 80-yard touchdown. Actually, it might have been an 80-yard touchdown, exactly.
Yeah,
80-yard touchdown for George Kittle. You see Eric Ebron going off in this Thursday night game against the Patriots. Obviously, you see Rob Gronkowski. You see guys running after the catch. And what was the biggest thing about Gerald Everett coming out of college? Well, I'll tell you. Glad you asked. Oh, he's really good at avoiding tackles, at slipping out of tackles, at dodging tackles. He is really good after the catch. So I would imagine in a game that probably is going to be all downhill for the Seattle Seahawks after the way they celebrated that win against Arizona was kind of pathetic. But anyway, it's going to be all downhill for them. And I think Gerald Everett's going to have a really good game. Another X factor, and I will say this. Oh, Joe, you mentioned Roger Saffold is a little banged up with his knee. Well, my X factor for you, I think you're just going to like all my X factors. Jamon Brown. Yes, nice. Jamon Brown. Jamon Brown could very well enter this game early on. The Rams might notice maybe, there's a tick off with Roger Saffold insert the sixth man. You see the sixth man in the NBA, there's a sixth man of the year award.
Wow.
Well, with Jamon Brown, he's going to have to be the sixth man of the year. Because if anybody on this offensive line goes down, he's going to have to step right up in there. And I believe he can, because he has been a starter in this league. So give it up for Jamon Brown. Hopefully we don't see him, because that would mean injury. But I would have to imagine that he is also an X factor, because I do think he is ready. His number might be called. This is something to monitor with Saffold. So X factor, those are my two X factors on offense, since it's not really fair. I mean, you kind of give me the big 3 1K receivers. You give me the best running back in the league, and now apparently the best quarterback in the league right now. So it's a little hard to do X factors. But defense, we'll move over to the defense. Yes, that's right. John Franklin Myers, how you doing? I know you're doing well. Just talked to you the other day. Anyway, John Franklin Myers ended up having the game-winning forced fumble. Oh, by the way, John Franklin Myers, his snaps have gone up consistently per game. He's by far more productive than the veteran Ethan Westbrooks. And oh, by the way, he has a higher PFF grade than the 5th overall pick, Bradley Chubb. So give it up for John Franklin Myers. He is going to get in. I believe he's going to start. I think now with Dom Easley out, I think he's found his niche on the edge. I think they do want him to be out there with Brockers, Sue, Donald, and Ebukam. So he is going to be one of my X factors. And then the last X factor on the defense, as I continue to run out of breath, is going to be, yes, that's right, Corey Littleton. And why is Corey Littleton the X factor? He's already looked really good. Well, Mark Barron is likely coming back, and that means Corey Littleton is going to have more help. There's more athleticism to go around the field. Mark Barron's all over the place. Corey Littleton's going to be all over the place. Ramik Wilson's a little bit of, I don't want to say it, but a weak link. So now you put in Mark Barron, and boom, Corey Littleton is going to have help. They are both going to be able to fly all over the field. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great, and you're going to love it. Those are my X factors. Joe, what about you?
I'm speechless. That was awesome. That was fantastic. Like I
need
said,
to edit in some music
no, I
for
think,
that. I just need a segment music.
I think you nailed it all. I think I went with my, I gave you, but, the D front, I gave you, I gave you Goff, and I like the Everett thing. Everett's coming on. That is a big deal. Everett, coming on, making strides and becoming, a consistent. He needs to do what he did in the first half of last year, which is just make one big play a game, especially in the red zone. Get this thing going, and become a consistent performer, contributor for this offense. So I like that. I'm gonna piggyback on what you got going on there. But just a tremendous job for hitting it all up, and let's go. I'm looking forward to. I think that was it. You did it. I was yawning about this game, and now you talking about your X factors has got me fired up. I'm going to buckle up my chin strap. I really wish we were playing right now. I'm ready to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a different format. I don't think Joe had no idea I was going to do that. I had no idea I was going to. It just kind of came out. Like,
it was organic.
Yeah. I need some. Joe, like, I'm gonna need a segment, X Factor segment, where I have just like obnoxious music in the background, like da 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 da, like,
oh, nice, wow.
Like, I don't know, like something like you know where I get that from? Sims and Lefko, like they kind of do weird things like that. The Guaranteed to Lose segment. If you ever listen to that, oh my god, Sims, like he goes off. And I know now. Rams fans are like, shut up, I hate Sims, he's my least favorite person in the world. He doesn't have Goff in his top 10, but
every fan base does that once in a while.
Yeah, no, it happens, but no, that was fun. I enjoyed that. And one thing, this is a little open note to Gerald. Dear Gerald, it was great meeting you after the Giants-Rams game. I am very impressed with your I guess short production, but explosive production. At 2 games I was at, you had 40+ yard gains on one play. What do I want to see? Well, I want to see a stiff arm like Vance McDonald. I want to see Gerald Everett basically just end somebody this weekend. That's what I want to see, Joe. I want to see a stiff arm from hell.
All right. That's good stuff. I'm there with you. All right, man. Let's, looking forward to, like I said, you've turned me around with that rant.
All right,
good job.
cool.
I'm
and
ready.
I guess I'll throw out a prediction.
Go ahead.
Because it's only fair. All right. The Rams beat the Giants last year when I was there 52-17. I don't think it's fair for any team in the league for you to predict that they're going to score 50 points. It's just not fair. That's why I'm going to predict 49. So I'm going to go with 49-13. I think the Seahawks score first. Everyone's going to lose their mind. Oh my God, what is going on? The Rams have the long wait, after their Thursday night game. So they'll be a little tad bit rusty to start. Seahawks score probably a BS Tyler Lockett touchdown to help Joe and his fantasy team.
So good.
So the Seahawks will score, and then it'll be 2 field goals, the rest of the way, and it's going to be the sack show. You guys are getting 10 sacks. No, it's not happening, but you'll get a lot of sacks. Russell Wilson's gonna, probably after this game, he's probably going to go over to New York and be like, "Yo, I want to go back to the Yankees and win a World Series." So,
he's gonna join the ALDS.
So yeah, that's my report. That's my prediction. Although that's not a real prediction. I don't actually believe that. But hope you guys enjoyed what was kind of the strangest podcast.
Someone asked me for a prediction. I gave 31-17. I don't normally like to give predictions, but since I already came up with a number, 31-17 Rams.
Well, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but
I appreciate that because I normally don't like giving predictions because no one really,
Well, I know you by now. I mean, how many podcasts have we done together? I probably over 50, easily over 50. So, I mean, this is 126. So, this is as good as it gets, guys. You've probably never seen us this far out of character before, but hope you guys enjoyed on a silly note. This has been the Downtown Rams podcast. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe on iTunes and leave a 5-star review if you deem that we are a 5-star podcast, like 130 plus other people believe. We appreciate it. And also, for our friends at Downtown Rams as well, Matt Herrera and Brian Giuanu are doing their own podcast on the Downtown Rams channel. It's called the Ramblin' On Podcast. You can check it out right on Spreaker. They also have it right on iTunes. It'll be on iHeartRadio and Spotify, down the road. So be sure to look that up and subscribe to that as well. Take care, guys, and enjoy the game.